That concludes the second tutorial in the introduction to learning how to read music. We covered key signatures with the use of sharps and flats. We covered the use of dynamics so that you get volume level from quiet to loud, piano to forte, and the crescendo decrescendos in between. We also covered the basics of phrasing with legato and staccato, and talking about the overall timbre of an instrument and how that gets indicated in music notation. Finally, I want to talk about one other thing, the fact that you usually encounter in guitar music more than one note at the same time. Every example that I've given you so far deals with just playing one note at a time, a single melodic line, and not worrying about playing multiple notes. That is a trick all to itself. It's a specialized skill you don't encounter in many instruments. A lot of instruments, the vast majority of musical instruments, only play one note at a time. However, with the guitar and piano, and sometimes other things like violin, for example, you do have to play, you are expected on a regular basis to play more than one note at the same time. Basically, the same principles apply, but you have to map out, you have to look a little bit further ahead, you have to be prepared for those situations in which you're going to encounter more than one note at the same time. The example I've given here is the Ode to Joy theme in two voices, so that you can see that the melody is there on the top that we talked about before. But there's also a bass voice to consider. So, essentially what happens is you can break it down into those different threads, what happens on different strings at the same time, and then say what happens just on this string at a time, and then what happens on this string. And then eventually put them together. Or you can take one measure at a time and look and see everything that happens, and then grasp that, move on to the next measure, map that, then move on to the next measure. Then you will be ready to be able to look at one measure and play it, and then start looking at the next measure while you're still playing the first measure, so that you can see that first measure. Now I'm starting to look at the second measure. Now I'm looking at the third, and I'm playing it. Now I'm looking at the next. Now I'm looking at the next measure. Now I'm looking at the next measure. And so forth. So that you can gradually get a little bit ahead and gradually expand your conceptual range so that you can see one measure while you're playing the previous measure, and then you can see a melodic line ahead while you're still playing the one previous to it. It's an incredibly difficult thing to get used to if you're not used to it, so I encourage you to be patient with yourself, but make time in your schedule to work on it, because reading music, being literate in the language of music, is an absolutely invaluable skill that will help your musicianship for as long as you play. Hope to see you in future lessons.